And we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Colin Steele from the University of Manchester. And he's going to be talking to us about COVID, rearrangements and service teaching. So, Colin.
Yes, thanks very much. Presumably you can now see and hear me. I suppose it's fair to say that for any type of maths teaching, indeed any type of teaching for any subject, yes, there have been massive rearrangements that have come along in the last year or so. But I would claim that for service teaching, there are certain aspects that come up that don't generally reflect themselves across the spectrum of the different kinds of maths teaching that we do. So I define service teaching here as being the teaching given by staff of one school or department to students in another school of department. And really, it's a collaboration between the two schools' departments. Of course, the collaboration also involves the students. It's a bit unfortunate that I put students at the bottom because they are the most important. Maybe I should have put them at the top. But we have also the hierarchy involved. And if we just consider the kind of interactions we had with those groups in normal times, then yes, the hierarchy, they would have various regulations that would pertain to the two schools or departments, but those would be gradually evolving regulations. They would respond to such things as changes at A level and so on in a gradual manner. And there would be interactions, of course, between the maths department and the department that the students were from, and those would be well-established procedures, established over many years, different individuals coming into being the ones that are interacting with the other department and so on, but it was an evolving situation, but what we could call it was a gradually evolving situation. Whereas where we are now, we've got a more rapidly changing situation. We are, of course, about to embark on a period where we'll be teaching the same material by a third totally different method in as many years. It's a rapidly changing situation, and possibly the situation is changing more rapidly than the normal response time of regulations and renegotiations and so on. So, rapid response changing here. So if I look, for example, at some key points on this diagram, number one here, we have when the regulations leave the hierarchy, and then 2 and 3, they are received by the relevant departments. Now, of course, when the regulations and the situation in general is received by the various departments, it's a case of they receive them, it's a case of they interpret them, they implement them, and so on. And we do have the situation there that, of course, each department may be in a situation where they would personalize them to their own subject, their own specialism, and so on. So this does possibly lead to, it leads to the possibility of a mismatch when we have a situation that arrives at the negotiations, the continuing negotiations, and between the maths departments and the departments that the students belong to. We have negotiations there, but they're now being fed in the same situation by several different routes there. And that can be something, it can be something that leads to a mismatch. If I were to say it was a problem, well, we make sure it doesn't become a problem. And if I say that the solution to this is regular communication, well, I believe it is more than just stating the obvious there. It's a case of getting to think about the form that this regular communication should actually take. And I will highlight a couple of the departments involved, because of course each department's carrying out service teaching will probably be giving it to in different forms to several different other departments there. But I can think, for example, of one particular department where there were weekly meetings of all staff teaching to a particular year, including those coming in from maths, and also the various directors of studies, and so on. So while it did mean that, yes, twice a week I would hear a progress report on how getting various pieces of equipment around the world for one of the specialist courses, I would hear that, but I would also take part in discussions about timing of coursework and other forms of assessment, how everything was going, and so on. One other department that I'm involved with, rather than having everybody meeting at the same time, it was a case of they made sure that they had an environment, a positive environment when it came to frequent communication, the communication on subjects of across schools and departments of how to teach the student. That was regarded as a priority, so it meant that the regular communication took place there. So it can take part in various different forms here. So I see that my timer has now come down to 0. So I present here the problem, rapidly changing situation where there's multiple routes by which regulations and other things would arrive at the negotiation between the departments there, and effective communication is the key. Thank you.